Okay, we're up to the Gemara on Yud, at the bottom of Yud Gimel Amid Beis, five lines up from the bottom. We spoke about Malila, which is this type of taking it in your hands and rubbing it. Now, the way to do Malila, guys, the normal way is in both hands. You take it like this. You take this and you rub it like this in your hands. That's the normal way. That's the normal way. So, however, Taisa says, Ketzad Moilo, Pirish, B'yontif, Ubishabis Asalimlo. So when it says, how do you do Malilo? It's only regarding Yontif are we discussing. But regarding Shabbos, it's also to do that. However, Menapech, when you go ahead and separate it, Ratzaloma b'Shabbos, the Yontif Shari af b'konin u'b'tamchoy. Shabbos, you have to go ahead and we saw yesterday, throw it from one hand to another hand. You can't use any kli. Whereas in Yontif, you would be permitted to go ahead and use a kli. Well, again, the whole thing is in your hand. Says Abayi mishmei the Rabbi Yosef. One finger on another finger. Again, the normal way is with your hands. On Yontif, the shino is that's the klach yad heshi. The shino is to go ahead and use. Abayi mishmei the Rabbi Yosef. Tarti, one and two fingers. Rava Amar, right? Rava Amar. Rava says, Kivin the mishane afilu choda kulinami. Since you're going ahead and making a shino by using one hand, and not two hands, again using one hand, not two hands. Then you put one on all of them. Now this is even in Shabbos. How do you go ahead and sift with your hands? So Amid Aleph, Mikishrei Etzboisav Ulamayla, and from Kishrei Etzav Ulamayla, but not with your. In other words, over here, guys, you use your hand, but not your palms. They laughed about this psak in Israel. Even the Mishana. I feel the cooler yodanami. Since you're making a shina, you can use the whole hand. You're not limited to using your fingers. You can use even your whole hand. You could even go ahead and use your whole hand. You can go ahead. What? Yes, the kasha. Since you're doing the shina, guys, you should be able to use your hand. So you don't have to use your finger. In one hand. So this is again the Indian Malila, you do it on Yontif with your hands, with your fingers, not your hand. And the Indian Menapich, which is sometimes a motion of you can even do on Shabbos without any kli, only your hands. On Yontif, you could even use a kli. Now we know that there's a heter of oichel nefesh, guys, but it's not carte blanche. It's not carte blanche. The key is if it's only something you couldn't do the day before. If it's only something you couldn't do the day before. In other words, there's a reason why shchita. Why can you shecht on Yatif? Because if you shecht the day before, it's not going to be fresh. You can get spoiled, right? It gets spoiled. So therefore, they had to veichel nefesh. But if it's something like toching, to grind something up, if it's something that is not going to be a difference whether you grind it up day erev Yontif or Yontif, you're not allowed to grind. You can't say, "Oh, I have this carte blanche heter of veichel nefesh. Let's go for it." You can't do it. The Mishnah is going to describe cases where you could, in other words, where there is a problem doing it on erev Yontif because it's not as good, or versus something that there's no difference. So again, the important the aside is just because you have a heter veichel nefesh, it's not a across the board carte blanche heter. Again, it's only if what you couldn't have done it the day before, and this is illustrated in this Mishnah. Beis says tavlin, when you go ahead and crush spices, neduchin b'moduch shel eitz. Now the normal way is to use a mortar of even. The way to crush it, they used a stone mortar. Over here, you need a shinoi. And what's the shinoi? You're using a wooden mortar. Notice that he says you use a maducha shel H, which is not the norm. It's a bit of a shinoi. That's by tavlin. The hamelach, now melach, it's not enough of a shinoi to go ahead and use a wooden mortar, but the pach, use a pach is like a pach shemen, it's like a earthenware flask. Or a spoon. In other words, you need more of a shinoi for salt than you do for tavlin. By tavlin, you need less of a shinoi. You need a shinoi nonetheless. You have to change from stone to eighths, but not so drastic a shinoi is to go ahead and use a earthenware kli or a pach. Let's see Rashi. Madachu buchna. This is a mortar shem making by kedarkai. You go ahead and use it in a normal way. I changed the gear, so you only need a small change. That's by tavlin. Aval b'melach, b'mokim sheyesh melach. In a place where you have heavy salt, then bepach shel cheres yiduchenu. You should go ahead and use a pach of cheres, and not a metucha. And we're going to see why by salt it's necessary more than by tavlin. No, Basil says tavlin is niduchin kidarkon b'madach shel even. By tavlin, you don't need any shinoi. Go ahead and use the stone mortar, right? Melach, however, you do need a shinoi, and that shinoi is one less b'madach shel eitz. So Rabbi Beis Shammai is more, as always, kidarkoi is more machmir than Beis Hillel. He's more machmir. No, we'll see the amount also. Now, the Kuli Alma Mia, Melech by Shinoi. Everyone holds, say Beis Shammai, say Beis Hillel, Melech requires a Shinoi. Beis Shammai, a larger Shinoi. You can't use a mortar at all. Beis Hillel, less of a Shinoi, just not a mortar of stone, but you could use an eighth mortar, right? But you don't need the Shinoi of a pach or a spoon. But you do need a Shinoi by Melech, right? Now, what is that? Why is that? So my timer, why do you need a Shinoi by salt and not by tavlin? Rav Huna Rav Chisda Chad Omar, Kol HaKederis Kulan Tzrichas Melech. Every kedera needs melech. Every kedera needs melech. So, since every kedera needs melech, what should you have done? You should have done it before, right? The ein kol kederis tzrichas tavlin, but not everyone needs spices. So, memela, you need more of a shinoi with something that you should have done before, like salt, rather than tavlin, which is maybe you don't need it. Maybe you'll only discover that you need it now. So that's one. We have a machloeks in Rav Huna Rav Chisda. One says the reason is that you may not need it. V'chad amar kol tavlin mafigin taimon. All spices, they lose their tam. Mafigin taimon. In other words, if you crush it, it gets exposed to the air. They do peppers. They right. The pepper's more fresh when you grind that, right? Why? Because if you grind it, you pre-grind it, it loses its zest. It loses its koyach. Right? Umelach ain't a mafigin taimon, but melech is no difference. Good. So again, two reasons, guys. One reason is salt, you're going to need. Tavlin, not necessary. Versus tavlin loses its flavor and the other one doesn't. So therefore, you're permitted to go ahead and do it. However, you need a small shina by tavlin. By melech, no, you need a larger shina. And according to Beis Hillel, you don't even need a shina by tavlin. You don't need a shina by tavlin. My binaya, what would the difference be between the two svaris, whether you knew you'll need it or it loses tam? My binayu, it could be nayu. The yoda, my kedera boy. You go levashulei. You go to the recipe book, and what does it say in the recipe book? A pinch of salt and a pinch of parsley and a little pepper. So you know exactly what it is. So like the man the Omar that you won't know if you need tavlin. Here you do. You do know you need tavlin. Like the man the Omar that it loses its time. It doesn't make a difference how much you'd still be able to go ahead and do it without the shinoi. Like Beis Hillel, right? Mashen came like the first reason you'd have to use a shinoi. We only care about Beis Hillel. Now, inami b'marika. Marika is saffron. Now, it seems to me marika does not lose its tam. If you crush it, it doesn't lose its tam. So now, according to him, according to the Mandi Omar, that you don't know how much you need. Over here also, you don't know how much you need. Like the Mama Mafik and Tama, well, it's not Mafik and Tama over here, right? It doesn't lose its tam. So you could have done it beforehand. Amr Yudam Shmuel. Now he's going to say different than our Mishnah. Neduchin kedarken bafila melach. 1 second. Everyone said melach. You have to go. Even Beis Hillel said you need sam shinoi. Not as drastic as shinoi as Beis Shammai, but you needed sam shinoi. Now we have Shmuel arguing on a Mishnah. Shmuel's an Amoira. He can't argue on a Mishnah and claim that what you're able to go ahead and take salt, sea salt, or whatever, and crush it up. I afraid to go right away. But I'm in melach boy shinoi. He said melech does require a shinoi. So how can Shmuel say it doesn't require a shinoi? And for the Gemara, who he always like the following Tana. The Tanya, in other words, Shmuel has a Tana who goes according to him, and this Tana argues on Mishnah and says salt does not require a shinoi in order to crush it. Says the Tanya, Amr Meya, like nechlu Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al neduchin shekinu neduchin kidarkoin umelech imahem. This is a Tana. You know what? All spices can be crushed in a normal manner, and at the same time you can crush salt, right? Only by itself. In other words, once I'm crushing a tavlin, I can crush salt also. But once the salt by itself, then not. Melach, you have to use a drastic shinoi, such as a earthenware kli or a spoon, and also litzli, limited to the amount. Heshel Shan Kelowitz. Litzli means what? For roasting. We saw yesterday early in the Masechta, for the pot, you need a full-fledged coating of salt to get rid of the blood, because it's going to be in a pot and it's going to come out. Mashain came by and go back in. So it has to be all the salt removed beforehand. Mashain came by roasting, you just need it to start flowing because the blood's going to go into the fire and you just need a little bit. So says Beis Shammai, if you do salt alone, now he has something in this price that I've been here in the Mishnah. You need a complete shinoi. You can't use a stone for sure. You can't let a stone mortar. You can't even use a eighths mortar, which would be one shinoi. You have to go the most drastic shinoi, which would be an earthenware kli or a spoon. And in addition, you're limited to the amount of salt you're able to go ahead and crack and ground at once. Avalai l'kedera, you wouldn't be able to permit it to go ahead and crush the amount of salt you would need for the ketera, which is a large amount of salt. Basil says no, b'chol davar, you can use anything. Even muktzah. 1 second, we know there are many kelim of muktzah. You can't even b'chol davar. You mean the amount can be any amount, and the shinoi, and you don't even need a shinoi. The bottom line is we have him on the Amma who says that you could go ahead and crush melach without a shinoi on Yantif. I think we have a gift to change over here. Amalei Rav Acha near Bein Aser. Amalei Rav Rav Acha Bardula. Rav is speaking. Amalei Rav Rav Acha Bardula lebrei ki dochas. When you do go ahead and crush salt, now you don't need a shinoi, guys. Pirish, you can use a maducha shaleven, like Shmuel. You could use a maducha shaleven. However, don't use that kli in its normal manner. Don't go ahead and use the crusher part. Dochas atzale atzluya. Use it. Do it on the side. Do it on the side. In other words, the shina is not in the kli you're using. The shina is the way you're using the kli. Right? The shina is not in the kli you're using. The shina is the way is in now. V'doich. So dochas atzluya v'doich. Rav Sheshes. Now Rav Sheshes was a sagina. Rav Sheshes was blind. He was blind. So he's a classic Gemara. He hears, but blind people, their sense of hearing is more acute. Right, they hear better because they use that sense all the time. So Rav Sheshes Shoma Kol Buchna. Rav Sheshes says he heard the sound of a mortar being used on Yantif. Omar Hai Lav Migavei de Beislehu. It's not in my house. It's not in my house. How do I know it's not in my house? Right, because I do not go ahead and permit use of a mortar in my house. Vidilma atzluya atzle. In other words, like Rav, maybe you were using the side. In other words, we're holding like Shmuel that you can use the mortar of Even. We're also holding that, however, use it in a way with a bit of a shinoi, and that little bit of a shinoi is to use it on the side. So how could Rav Sheshes know for sure, without a shadow of a doubt, it wasn't being used in his house? Maybe it was. And maybe it was being used on the side, which would be okay. Says the Gemara, the Shami David Solo Kole. He heard the sound was very clear. In other words, he was able to ascertain the sound between the normal way and this. Fred Gemara Vidilma Tavlin Havi. How do you know? Maybe it's Tavlin. Salt is one thing, but Tavlin for sure you can go ahead and crush it in a normal manner according to Beis Hillel. Says the Gemara, no, Tavlin Nevuche Menapich Kole. It's going to have a loud sound, and therefore he was able to tell. So he knew it wasn't from his house. Because he was able to tell the sound of a tavla being crushed, he was able to tell the sound of salt being crushed, and then what? That was crushed, in which way it was crushed. Okay, now, a large crusher was used for something called tisni. Guys, tisni is it's cut up in 4 ways. It's a piece of grain, it's wheat, and it's sliced in four directions, okay? So it goes into quarters. So they would use for wheat, they would use a machteshes gedola, a large grinder, and for tavlin they would use a small grinder. But with that in mind, let's begin again. For wheat, a large grinder, and for tavlin, for spice, a small grinder. So with that in mind, let's begin. Tan Rabbanan, ein oisin tisni. You cannot make tisni, which is again that 4-quarted wheat. The ein koichin b'machteshes. You can't crush it Now, it's very interesting because one hand you just told me you can't go ahead and make tisni, which is mashma tisni you can't make, but something else you could make, meaning you could crush. And then in the same toichetei dibur, you say what? Evein koichim machteshes. So it seems to be tarti. It seems to be a stira, guys. On one hand, you're telling me, right? You're telling me that what you can't make tisni, mashma something that's not tisni, you could crush. And then you say, right? Now the reason over here is tircha. The ain't tircha meruba, v'hadatani ain't koishin kal. In other words, here there's the Indian of tircha. This tisni seems to be a pain to make. And yontif, it's a tircha is also another reason to look into oichel nefesh, whether it's a tircha gedolah or not. So it seems this tisni is a tircha. So you say, one hand you can't go ahead and make tisni, which is a big tircha, and then the other hand, and you said you can't crush it. L'chayra, why not? I mean, you're telling me it's not such a tircha you could crush, and then you say you can't crush. So it's not two separate things, it's one thing. What's the reason you can't make tisni? It's because you can't crush. It's one thing. Says the Gemara, 1 second. So what do you have to say the first pshat? Guys, what do you tell me? You can't make tisni because you're not allowed to use a crusher. So just tell me you're not allowed to use a crusher. Why do I have to know what you can do with it? Once you can't use it, I can't make tisni. You don't have to tell me tisni is not my little moirid. I can't do it. I can't do it because I can't use a crusher. If we learn just you can't use a crusher or some type of mortar, I would have thought the hani mili. So what are we speaking about? The machteshes gedayla. I would say only a large one for chitin. Al machteshes ketana, but for a small one, ema dummy. I would think that what you possibly go ahead and use it because it's more what it's a shinoi because you usually use it for a tavlin and now you're using it for chitin. Again, remember the hakdama. For the chitin, you used a large one. For tavlin, you used a small one. Now I'm using a small one for chitin. So maybe you would think that it is permitted. Kamash one, ain't nice and tisni, right? You can't make tisni, right? Even with a small one. Frag the more Tanya, ain't koichim machteshes gedoyla. Avol koichim machteshes ketana. Mashma, you could use a small one. So you have a stira. First one it says you can't use a small crusher, a small grinder. I say crusher, grinder, but don't quote me on it, okay? It's a machteshes, a grinder. But mashma, the second bite, so you could use one. So what's the din? Can you use a small grinder or not? Rabbi, kitanya nami masnisan machteshes gedoyla. Let's see Rashi. Kitanya nami masnisan dila el. When we said before einois and tisni, and then we said ein machteshes, it's speaking machteshes gedoyla. Tanya. V'loy tema matam kama. Let's change gears. It's not matama. Elatarti katana. You learn two separate dinim. V'achi kamar. Here's the shot in the Bryce, guys. One. Ein oisla tisni klal, period. Afilu bikatana. You make tisni even a small one. The ein koichin shar katishos machteshes going daisa and stam machteshes bigadoyla kamairi. So guys, two clauses, right? Ein oisla tisni, anything, any machteshes, right? Whether it's large or small. Ein koichin machteshes, only a large one, but a small one you could. Okay, so now it's not a stira. Now it's not a stira because you could use a small grinder, but just not for tisni because it's a pain. Rabbi says like kasha. Rabbi says no. The stira you ask between machteshes katana and machteshes katana is not a stira whatsoever. Like kasha, holon, v'holahu. Now, we all am asking you can't use machteshes gedoyla, correct? Right. But you could use a machteshes katana. In Bavel, it seems they were very poor. They didn't have servants. So you could use the katana because they're not going to go ahead and tell you there's a gedoyla because there's no one to tell you. But in Eretz Yisrael, where they had what? Avodim, if you're going to use the machteshes katana, they're going to say, we use the machteshes katana, but really what did they do? They use the gedoyla. So that's the way they answer it up. Says Rashi. It's taka giving a reason for the first. The reason you can't make tisni is because you can't make a machteshes. And it's also going on a katana. The kamar ain't koichin klal. U'deramin Allah avol koichin. You could use a katana. Yes, the stira. What's the stira? There you said you can't use a katana. Here you say you could. Halon. That's speaking about us. The less lon avdi the mizalzi. We don't have any avodah. We're going to mizalzel. Therefore, you can use a katana. Halu Eretz Yisrael. This is the avdi mizalzi. If you're the gedoyla, they can make a gedoyla. V'yoyim b'katanas. You know, they'll lie to you and they'll tell you what. Rav Papi ikla lebei Marshmuel. Rav Papi came to the house of Marshmuel. I see lo daisa. They brought him this dish, this cereal dish. It's dice called daisa. Because he felt it was ground on yontif. Of dua, maybe he could. It was maybe a machteshes katana which is permitted. Says more the chazi dahabi dayik tfei. He thought it was very, it was very crushed, very fine. So he knew it was what, and used a large grinder. Maybe it was made erev yontif. Says more the chazi dahabi kol of tzahir. It sort of had white streaks in it that was very fresh. By saying a shiny babe, Shmuel, the ikka pritzusa, the avdi, and the hasam Shmuel, they were very uppity avodim, and they. Someone just left. They were okay. Anyway, by maving of him. Okay. Okay, geschmack. Good. Okay. So in other words, so now we have a little bit about again anything. The rule of thumb. Remember, anything you could do erev yontif, and the heter of eichel nefesh doesn't apply. You got to do it erev yontif. Again, then it does apply again. Shchita, anything that is going to be a difference. But again, you wouldn't be permitted. Let's say so. I know Peppa probably like the man the only that Peppa loses his time. You would be like the man. We have all this stuff yeah, salt water. Yeah, it should be a shadow of tanning. That could be done before, right? That could be done before. It's better at night. They do, but there are people going right before for sure. That would be a very good example. Yankel's good example to say that, right? Salt water should be made before Yantif, right? Grinding mara should it depends what you do, but there's a heter to go ahead and grind it there because it would go ahead and lose its time. Okay, what do we know about boirer? You can't do it, right? Good, great. Who remembers the three tanoim? 3 conditions of boirer. Okay, I see that. We just need a chazara. Okay.
Good from the bad.
Huh?
What is good from bad?
What was that?
The good from the bad. You're allowed to take good from bad.
Okay, you're allowed to take the good from the bad one. It has to be biyad, and it has to be miyad. It has to be biyad. You have to take it hand, not a kli, and you have to eat it miyad. You can't go ahead and start. You can't go ahead and start putting it all together, right? So that's the heta. So, can you go ahead and be boyer on yontif? Can you? Boyer on yontif is a good kasha. What's this? Can you boyer on yontif? Tzvi showed up and asked me the kasha. Can you boyer on yontif? Now, haboyer kidney is beyontif. Someone's being boyer legumes, right? Kidney is beans or whatever constitutes legumes. Kidney is beyontif, plants. Beishama says boyer oichel, meaning for oichel, you boyer the oichel and you eat. In addition, not only oichel but the other 2 tanoim as well. That it has to be biyad and miyad. It has to be in a normal way. You go ahead and do it in a normal way. So boyer oichel, you boyer the oichel and you eat. Boyer kidarkoi v'cheikoi. You can go ahead and be boyer kidarkoi pashtus. You can take out the bad from the good. And you could do it in your lap. Bikonon, you could even use a funnel. Ubetamcha, you can even use a large plate. In other words, I can use a kli. So he's apparently like base Hillel, the tanoim of boyer do not apply on yontif. They don't apply on yontif. Don't leave quickly. Okay. So now, boyer kidarka b'cheikoi b'konon ubetamcha avaloi b'tavla. You can't go ahead and use a tavla. You can't use a tavla. Why can't you use a tavla? So we had a Rashi. On Yud Beis on the Beis. I don't think I did this Rashi. Rashi says, if you use a kli, it appears if you're using it for the next day. These kalim, tavla, and napa, those are used when you have to process a large amount. So it appears if you use these things, in other words, Rashi, by the question, why do we make a distinction by the different type of kalim you could use for boyer? Once it's eichel nefesh and we're letting you go, why can't you use a napa and a kavra? Why are you limited to using a tamchli and a kanoin? So he's answering because those are normally used to process a lot, and you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to do it for yontif, not for after yontif. We'll get into that a little bit tomorrow. Rabbi Gamliel af madiach v'shayla. You can even go ahead, take the legumes, put it in water, and have it skim off the top, as we'll see. Okay, now let's begin Rabbi Gamliel. Tanya, I'm Rabbi Gamliel. B'medama mamurim, says Rabbi Gamliel, b'medama mamurim, that you're able to go ahead and Beis Hillel said you could take the psoilus, guys, and throw it away. In other words, this is classic boirer. I'm taking the beard. I'm taking the beard. Probably the most easiest issa deraisa to be over is probably boirer on Shabbos. Probably it's incredible how easy it is. But it's incredible. You eat a cherry, guys? Take a cherry. What do you do? Take the stem and you go. Boop. What should you do? You take the cherry, pull the cherry. That's the oichel mitach psilas rather than psilas. And then what? What do you, how can you do that? You're separating the. Yeah. So you take the cherry, you pull it. See, there's certain things that have to in your mind. You should be aware of that. Like always when you have two things like that, always try to pull the good from the bad. But watermelon seeds are for sure. And you're poking. What?
What's watermelon?
Oh yeah, what is that? You get angry when you find them now, right?
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Right. You find one, you get angry, like wow. Who put them there? I'm not such an expert. You gotta speak to the brothers. Anyway, so now I figure once I use the word uppity, I might as well go all the way. Might as well go all the way. I'm finished anyway. If anyone ever finds this, I'm finished anyway.
The kid in East New York is
This is not a woke daf.
This is not a woke daf, is correct. Okay, now the Medavam Amurim that Beis Hillel allows you to take the psilas, guys, is kishal oichel meruba ala psilas. When there's more oichel than psilas, when there's more food than the psilas. In other words, he will let you take the watermelon seed. Aval psilas meruba ala oichel. If there's more psilas than oichel, divri akol noitel as oichel umenech as a psilas. Then he would agree that you have to do boirer. You have to take out the Michael and then leave the psilas.
We're talking about Yantiv, but this is the way you do it on Shabbos.
Well, again, yeah. Now, psilas meruba ala oichel mi ikaman deshari. 1 second, guys. Well, listen to this case. What do you have? You have more seeds in our fictitious thing. You have more seeds than watermelon, right? You have more seeds than you had backward. You had somebody who messed up the hybrid instead of ending up with more watermelon, less seeds. He ended up the opposite, right? So you have more seeds than watermelon. So guys, okay. So now, guys, what happens? Bottle b'roif, the watermelon becomes muktzah. The seeds are muktzah, right? So the watermelon becomes muktzah. So how can you take the watermelon? Says hello, you take the watermelon because you have more psilas. You leave the psilas, you take the eichel. You can't even take the eichel. It's mamish now. It's what? It's muktzah. It's muktzah. Okay. So says the Gemara. Right. Umi ikaman deshari. Is there anyone who would permit taking from eichel from psilas when there's more psilas? So like tzricha the nafish betircha bezuta b'shireha. It's a bigger. It's more. The eichel is more, guys, but it's a bigger pain to take out the psilas. So Rashi says, look at Rashi. The nafish betircha sheyesh dak. It's very small. So there's more, guys. There's more food than psilas, but it's a bigger pain to get rid of the psilas. Who the Ami Beisil Noitel Psilas? When there's more tircha to take out the food, then you take out the psilas. The mute betircha adif. Avlam Tareach Psilas Marubal Shalaychel. Divriyakol, you're going to take the psilas. So it's not speaking about. Of course, it's speaking about there's more food. The question is tircha, which is a bigger tircha. So if it's a bigger tircha to take the psilas, you take the eichel. Conversely, if it's a big tircha to take the eichel, right? Then what? Because it's small, then you would take the psilas. You would take the eichel. Rabbi Gamliel Oimer Af Medich B'Shoila Tanya Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Tzadik Kachaya Minig Shel Beis Rabbi Gamliel. This was the minig in the house of Rabbi Gamliel. Shoyim Mevian Deli Mali Adashim. They would bring a dish that was full of water. Umatzifin Lov Mayim Adashim is beans. Umatzifin Lov Mayim. They would then go ahead and float the beans on the water. V'nimtza Eichel Amata. The food would be on top. Upsilis the bottom. Upsilis Lamaila, and the psilis would be floating at the top. Tanya Ibcha. That it was the food on the top and the psilis on the bottom. Like Kasha, Haba Afar, with it was Afar with dirt, which is heavier, it would sink to the bottom. Haba Gili, if it's straw, then it would float to the top. So depending upon whatever the psilis is, that's the location where it would be. Right? Says the Mishnah. Beishami Yoimin. Ein mishalchim b'yontif el amanos. You want to send a friend to your gift on Shabbos, you can only send him a mana. You can send him something that's muchin that he can use right away. A piece of basar, some fish, anything that he can eat right away. What? Shepherd's pie. But Beis Hillel says, mishalchin behema chaya v'oif. Beis Hillel says, mishalchin behema chaya v'oif. Bein chayin, bein shchutim, whether they're geshachtin or whether they're alive and they have to send, you're able to send as a gift. Mishalchin yeinois, shmonim, osalsois, you can send wine or oil or flour, for kitnios and legumes. Avalei tfua, you can't go ahead and send tfua because again, you can't, tfua involves grinding, and you're not allowed to grind the tfua. Rabbi Shimon mata b'tfua, Rabbi Shimon feelings afilu tfua, right? Because in other words, you can make them in a way, Shem yivashtem b'kedera, v'yikil shem machteshes katana. Maybe you cook them in a pot and then you can grind them with a machteshes katana, which would be okay. Rabbi Yechiel, muvachla yasena b'shura. When you send the gifts, make sure you don't send it b'shura with a lot of fanfare. Rashi says, "Lo yishlach adorin al yidei anoshim harbe." The av shamilsa, because it draws attention. V'nirin k'malichin limcha b'shuk. That's the problem. It appears if you're going by drawing attention, it appears if you're going to do business on Yantif. It appears you're doing business on Yantif. Okay, Satana, what ain't shoyin p'chuchim mishleisha, and there's no less than 3 bnei adam. That's the minimal. Boy Ravashi, tilsa gavre, but tilsa mini might take. You have guys, 3 people bringing you the same thing. That's av shemilsa. What about 3 people bringing 3 different things? Do we go after the people or do we go after the things? Do we go after the min? If you go after the people, you can't send it. If you go after the min, then you could. And the Gemara answers tekel. Rav Shimon mata b'tfua, Rav Shimon mitzvah b'tfua, to even send tfua. Tanya Rav Shimon mata b'tfua, kegoin chitin lasas boy ludyois. Rashi says ludyois, Michael chitin. Really helps us, right? And soirim, litein lifnei behimasai. They used to, soirim used to be what barley, guys, was considered animal food. For those people who like barley chalent, it used to be animal food, right? Now we use it. Adoshim, lasais mehen resisin, not a resisin. Michael asim and adoshim, very good. So Oskar probably touches it bean food, right? Or again, therefore, since you could use it for these things, you could send it. Because these things are permitted to, they don't, guys, the key here is you don't have to grind them. In other words, they're usable right away. So therefore, it's like a money, send it. Mishalchan kalim, you could send kalim. Now, kalim over here, Rashi says right is begodim. Don't think it's a kli. A kli, of course, you could send begodim. We're speaking about garments. Mishalchan kalim, bein tfurim, whether they're sewn, bein shein tfurim, they're not sewn. V'af b'sheish ben kalayim, that is a chiddush. Even if they have kalayim, you could send it. We'll see what that means. Provided what you could use it during the moed. Avaloy sandal hamasumar, you can't send a hobnailed sandal for Shabbos-tic reasons. You might remember Daf Samach and Shabbos, the terrible ma'aseh that took place with these sandals. Yeah. Either they caused the noise on top of the cave and they trampled each other, or they would trample that. And with the there was different days in the Gemara what happened, but nothing good happened. So there were guys on Shabbos and Yontif. You can't go ahead and send these. Nor a minnow that's not tougher, because again, it's going to fall apart. If you don't, even a white shoe, they should because why? It needs to be blackened. You don't wear white shoes, not Joe Namath, right? This is what? This is the rule. Kolshen uslan by beyontif, anything that you can use on yontif, mishalchan, so you're able to go ahead and send.
Nothing good happens with weeks anyway.
Now, you're saying good. Bishleim tfurin, but it's not time for the sports report. Now, Bishleim tfurin, very good tfurin when it's what it's sewn chazi lemalbush. You could wear it, so I can understand why you could send it. She'ain tfurin, if it's not sewn nami chazi leksuye, you could use it as a cover, so it's usable. Ela kalayim lamay chazi. What in the world is kalayim able that you could send it? The chitema, why are you going to say chazi lemeimach tate? You can go ahead and fold it and sit on it or lie on it. But Tanya, it says, Lo yalo alecha, mashma, Lo yalo alecha, you can't put on yourself kalayim, avlat yochel at sio tachtecha, right? But you're able to put it beneath you. However, don't leave. Aval omru chachamim, asul lasas kain, even to put it underneath you. Shema, we had this in Yuma, guys. Shema tachrich lo nima al bisrei, maybe it'll cling to him nima on his basar, and it'll be meschamim and heat up, which would be asar. So right now, what he could use it for? You can't use it on top of you for sure not. You can't even use it on the bottom of you. So how can you send kalayim? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll put a bottom and a lie on top of it with other things, and I'll have it underneath. I've Mishum and Pazi, I'm Mishum and Levi, I'm Rabbi Yossi ben Shol, I'm Rabbi Mishum Kehila Kedushli V'Shalayim, Afilu Esam Atzoy Zuel Gavzu, 10 sheets one on top of the other, the Kalayim Tachteyem, Asa Lishan Aleihem, it's Asa. So the Chayra, great kasha. How can you send the beggar of Kalayim? How can you use it for? Ela bevilain, you could use it as a curtain. A vilain, you could use it as a curtain, a Kalayim big curtain, right? No problem. You're not wearing it. It's not mischamein. Ay v'amula. Why is vilain considered a kli, even though it doesn't have a base kibble? Why is it considered a kli b'kamel tuma? Because the shamish, the attendant, is mischamesh kenegdo. If he's cold, he would take the vilain and he would go ahead and huddle into it. Now it's what as a shem beged, as a shem kli it's tame, and now we have the problem out of kalayim. So, Ella, what are we speaking about? Percussion. We're speaking about a hard beged that doesn't heat up, that you could send. Yeshua, namta gamda the narish, the svelte beged of narish, the special narish, sharia to wear kalayim because it's hard and it won't be miskamin. Amra Papa, Ardlin, Rashi brings it some type of shoe that they would put on top of their shoes. Sometimes it's goat skin made of kalayim, ein ben mishum kalayim. And l'chayred, I guess it's hard. Amarava hanit srori de pshiti, a coin bag. Ain't ben mishum kalayim because the coins are cold and they'll stop the bag from heating up if you're wearing it next to yourself. However, the bizrani, if it's a beged, if it's a pouch of seeds, yesh ben mishum kalayim, there would be one a din of kalayim. However, Rashi Yama no echad whether it's a coin pouch or it's a seed pouch, ain't ben mishum kalayim. But if you're derechim mekach, it's not derechim. Let's just a little more. Avaloi sandal I'm assuming because we know this already. You can't send a hobnailed sandal. Sandal I'm assuming my time aloi. Because the mice of Masechta Shabbos thing. Amar Rabbi Sandal Masuma Asul and Noloi of Umutal Taltali. It's Asul to go ahead and wear it. It's Mutta to carry. It's not Muktzah. Asul and Noloi Mishum Maisa Shahaya because of the Maisa, the tragedy that occurred during the time of the rebellion. Umutal of the Romans. Umutal Taltali. Well, even the Tani Mishalchin when it says you can't send it. Guys, if you can't go ahead, it's muktzah, then certainly you can't send it. So obviously, when it says you can't send it, it must be it's not muktzah. Rabbi Yudah, afli min alavan, even not a min lavan. Tanya Rabbi Yudah, mate b'shachar, he permits you to send a black shoe for Isa beloved, and he asked it a white shoe. But they should serve pizzas like here because you need shoe polish to go ahead. What? Did I skip? I did I did skip. Of course, you can't wear it. Guys, put on a shoe that the leather is going to fall apart. Of course, you can't wear it. Like Nisrucha, the Afghan didn't knock the pesichi. You have sichi, a little pegs in holding it. It's not sewn, but you have like a bobby pin holding it together, like some type of wooden chip holding it together. Nonetheless, you can't wear that. It's going to come out. If you don't they should serve pizzas like here because it needs to nail a shoe polish. If you they should serve it's you have to smooth it out. They're not arguing. The question is, was the inverted or exverted? The mar bisra basri demar bisra latachas. According to Mar, one place the basa was towards that, so you don't have to go ahead and smooth it out. Basri demar bisra el, it's on the top, and therefore you'd have to go ahead and smooth it out. Okay, I don't know exactly when the share is going to be tomorrow. It'll be posted.